Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, fellow Democrats and friends. I want to use this opportunity today, before the President makes his State of the Nation address tomorrow, to set out very clearly what the DA is doing to turn South Africa around, but also to explain how we are pushing the ANC and government to do a lot more, a lot faster. The reality is that unless the government of national unity urgently implements policies that drive economic growth and enable job creation, South Africa will fail. The hopes, the livelihoods, the dreams, the aspirations, and the security of the South African people are on the line. And those are the stakes. And they are high stakes indeed. And that is why the Democratic Alliance took the decision to make growth and jobs our simple overriding objective within the government of national unity. And we are delivering this in the ministries that we run. In agriculture, I'm driving the growth and jobs agenda in 4 ways. Firstly, I'm reviewing and reforming legislation and regulation that is outdated or impedes the growth of the sector. Last year at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, protocols were signed to expand the trade in dairy and beef and wool protocols. And this is part of a concerted effort to ensure that we improve market access for South African agricultural products around the world. And that where possible, we deepen and expand existing trade agreements, but we also go on the hunt for new opportunities for South African products around the world. When our products make it to export markets, they create jobs and they help expand growth in the country. Just yesterday, I announced the reopening of the export of apples to Thailand, a sector that had been closed off to us for over 16 years. This market expansion is going to have profound implications for both growth and jobs. Ongoing efforts are underway to ensure that South Africa remains part of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which gives us preferential access to the United States market for not only manufactured goods, but also agricultural products and agro-processed products. Providing much more effective support to farmers to enable them to access finance through the blended finance scheme is essential if we're going to expand the number of farmers in South Africa, and in so doing address and improve food security, but at the same time ensuring we have viable, sustainable and profitable farming operations, and that we move far more people out of the subsistence farming arena into the family and commercial farming arena, where they too can start to partake in the value chains that will secure the economic future. Another big focus is to bring private sector management into Cape Town's port, but also to focus on our rail infrastructure. Having indicated and met with the industry and the fruit sector particularly, they have indicated that they are prepared to massively expand production over the coming medium-term process, provided they can have the guarantee that they can get their products to the port and those ports are able to get their products to the international markets. Can you imagine what a quadrupling of the citrus and horticultural output would mean for jobs in the agricultural sector? And so we need a functioning port and we need a functioning rail system to ensure that we can move the products around the country as quickly, efficiently, and effectively as possible. On public works, our Public Works Minister, Dean McPherson, is turning South Africa into a construction site. He is using infrastructure and Infrastructure South Africa to pilot a number of new approaches to how we deal with critical infrastructure in 4 municipalities. And he intends to roll this program out to another 18 municipalities once the pilot is done. This is in line with his commitment to use public assets for public good, to use infrastructure as a vehicle for growth and opportunity in the country. He's fast-tracking 82 strategic integration projects worth 437 billion rand, with a focus on transport, water, energy, and housing. He's also attracted hundreds of millions of rands in private sector interest to redevelop dilapidated government-owned buildings and properties, and intends to expand the program after the first round of 27 have been completed. This again is a move to ensure that public assets are used for public good. For far too long, government projects have failed to meet deadlines or have run severely over budget due to corruption and the involvement of the construction mafia. And as Minister McPherson has said very clearly, their days are now numbered after he piloted a program in eThekwini that brought the police, players in the construction sector, and various other role players together to combat the scourge of the construction mafia, which for far too long has led to inflated prices, has held back growth, and ensured that we aren't able to proceed with those projects. At the Department of Home Affairs, Dr. Leon Schreiber has rewritten South Africa's visa regime to enable a massive inflow of the skills that we need in South Africa to unlock the job creation benefits that inevitably follow when that happens. Even more boldly, he is now digitizing Home Affairs in its entirety. South Africans can now look forward to doorstop delivery of passports and smart IDs, a Home Affairs presence in hundreds and thousands of more bank branches across South Africa, a modern electronic travel authorization system to enable secure online digital application, adjudication, and communication of all visa outcomes, and a secure digital system to eliminate identity fraud, drive financial inclusion, eliminate waste and duplication in government services, and revolutionize the way citizens interact with government. He's putting the home back into Home Affairs. The economic knock-on effects of a properly run Department of Home Affairs will give people a faster, easier route into the economy, and will finally put an end to the ridiculous requirements that it takes for us to bring in skilled workers to come into South Africa and share their expertise and assist us with the process of growing our economy and creating jobs. The border management's use of drone technology has seen a 215% increase in the arrests of people illegally entering South Africa over the past festive season, which shows the success of digital technologies. Through the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, Solly Malatsi is driving an ambitious plan to get cheap smartphones with fast internet connections into the hands of millions of poor South Africans. By 2029, he wants the majority of South Africans to be connected. That's up from just 14.5% at the last count in 2023. Now, this is important because World Bank data shows very clearly that on average, every 10% increase in broadband penetration results in a concomitant 1.21% increase in GDP. We need that economic growth. The growth agenda has to be a priority, and these are some of the ways to get there. Dr. Dion George at the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment is implementing measures now to empower coastal communities through sustainable fisheries management. The department is advancing policies to ensure that we are able to support small-scale fishers and improve the regulation of aquaculture and commercial fishing industries. In particular, 12 proclaimed fishing harbors have been identified now as coastal economic hubs, providing opportunity for growth and jobs to the communities they serve, while at the same time massively improving food security. In another move to help small-scale fishers, the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment has allowed subsistence fishers to catch 36% more of legal species. This will reduce the cost of the living burden on these households and improve food security, whilst not compromising the sustainability of our fish stocks. The department is developing innovative financing mechanisms to attract both private and public investment in ecotourism, conservation, and environmental infrastructure. The National Biodiversity Economy Strategy is projected to create 397,000 new jobs and inject 127 billion rand into the economy annually by 2036. In education, Saviri Gahube, despite managing an ongoing funding crisis that can also only be resolved if we're able to grow the economy so that it generates the money we need so that we can fund education fully, is still driving reforms aimed at improving education outcomes. A strategic reorientation of the education system towards early learning, which is the most important phase in a child's education. She's launched the Social Compact for Early Childhood Development, aiming for universal access to quality early childhood development for every single child in the country. This effort has already yielded over 600 million rand to establish an outcomes fund. This fund will provide ECD development services to around 100,000 children and improve care quality in 1,500 early childhood development programs over the next 3 years. Minister Gwahube has operationalized the National Education and Training Council of Experts, and this body will continue to advise her on the best way to drive time on task and better education outcomes, making sure that teachers are in class, on time, doing their jobs, educating the leaders of the future. She's also launched an online tool which allows the education sector to track and identify pit latrines so that they can be eradicated wherever they are. She's also, as you know, producing norms, standards, and regulations in conjunction with civil society bodies and role players in the education space to make it impossible to undermine language rights in schools and to make sure that mother tongue instruction is given the expression that is contained in the Constitution. This February, our government met to finalize the medium-term development plan. This plan will then inform the budget, and the budget and the medium-term development plan together will then guide government's program of action over the next 5 years. While the DA is delivering growth and jobs in the portfolios that we are controlling, we continue to push the ANC and other parties to embrace with urgency the economic reforms that South Africa desperately needs. There's sadly been an amazing lack of emergency and urgency, and we are pushing the ANC to implement pro-growth, pro-job reforms through the medium-term development plan process, and we have compelled the President to announce reforms during his State of the Nation address. And we want to see these things within the SONA. We believe that we need greater fiscal discipline and debt management. The money we have to spend paying for our debt as a country is reducing and crowding out the money that we need for the essential services, and currently consumes a full 21% of the budget. If we cannot bring debt down to below 70% of GDP, those borrowing costs will capsize the entire fiscus. To avoid this catastrophic eventuality, the GNU needs to do a number of things. Firstly, it should commit to a credible plan to reduce government debt and then stick to it. It's the sticking to it part that is actually the most important. We need to end bailouts to failing state-owned enterprises and begin the phased privatization and public-private partnerships of non-essential SOEs, redirecting those funds to the critical economic infrastructure and service delivery. Thirdly, we must implement a strictly managed spending review across government departments, ensuring measurable outcomes for allocated budgets and eliminating programs that are duplicated or lack impact. And there should be no holy cows when we do this. There should be no special interest. A good, hard, clinical look at how we can reduce programs that are not working and how we can reprioritize those funds to the areas that are showing progress and are working. The reality is that it is essential for us to now adopt pro-growth economic reforms. 5 years is not a long time. And if we don't take the tough decisions now, it's going to be a lot harder to implement them further down the line. And the reality is that South Africa cannot cut, tax, or borrow our way to a better future. The only credible, sustainable path to a better future is to achieve much more rapid economic growth. And that means having the political will to drive reforms with the real urgency and zeal that they require. We've suggested that these reforms should include fast-tracking reforms in network industries, in particular, energy, logistics, and telecoms, to enhance efficiency and private sector participation, including very specifically the concessioning of ports at Cape Town and Richards Bay. Over 50% of our agricultural exports move through this port of Cape Town. The port inefficiency is hampering us. We cannot wait for a pilot project in Durban, which is already mired in legal battles, to hold us back. We now need to make the bold decision that these ports need urgent attention and that our economic growth would not be possible without the infrastructure that is so required for any economy to be able to make it happen. We also need to make it far easier to do business in South Africa. We need to cut red tape and compliance burdens which make South Africa difficult to do business with. The World Bank has offered us assistance in this regard at no cost to ourselves, and we really should be snapping that opportunity up. We also need to look at removing tariffs on all goods that are not produced in South Africa and reviewing all master plans to remove the obstacles that contain within them that are obstacles to growth and jobs. We also need to see greater commitment to public sector efficiency and a real crackdown on corruption. The reality is that growth depends on a public sector that delivers services efficiently without corruption. To this end, we need to massively improve procurement transparency and ensure that public procurement is decentralized in order to curb corruption. The new Public Procurement Act includes worrying provisions that will entrench opportunities for corruption by centralizing power in a single point. We believe that steps need to be taken to secure real value for money in procurement processes. It is also essential that we embrace and harness technology and implement digital technologies and transformation across government services to reduce the bureaucratic inefficiencies, opportunities for corruptions, and of course the friction costs that they add to every single process within government. But the benefits of digital transformation across all government services go far beyond only that. Such a transformation would ensure universal access to important documents like identity cards. It is a travesty that grown men and women have to stand in queues, take time off work, and limit their very meager income just to be able to access a service that could so easily be digitally transformed to make their lives easier. It will ensure that there's financial inclusion by giving people the means to be able to actually open bank accounts. A digital transformation, allowing a proper identification system across South Africa through Home Affairs, will also help us to massively eliminate fraudulent payments at places like SASSA and NSFAS. It will help combat identity theft and fraud. It will also help to improve tax collection, more secure borders, and fewer piles of paperwork which consume unnecessary time and increase the risk of loss and fraud. This is a crucial need and one we are deeply committed to, as can be seen by the digital transformation initiatives being led by Leon Schreiber in Home Affairs. The period that we've had without load shedding has been stabilizing for our economy. So load shedding's recent return has jeopardized the stabilization and emphasizes again the urgent need for reform. Reforms that will ensure the entire energy sector functions with one goal in mind: to drive economic growth. We cannot attract the factories, the manufacturing concerns that we need into our country if we are lacking the most basic resources that they need in electricity and water. And this is going to mean swallowing some tough pills. It's going to mean expediting private sector participation in power generation and transmission in order to break the monopoly. We cannot be beholden to a single generator and supplier of electricity in our country. And if anything has shown us the last week and a half, we need to accelerate those reforms in order to ensure it happens. It also means a very clear timeline needs to be set out and established for both the vertical and horizontal unbundling of Eskom and the removal of regulatory barriers to a competitive energy market. Independent power producers and companies in South Africa and the world over stand ready to step into the space, to innovate and to relieve our problems if only we give them the opportunity to do so. And at the same time, we need to urgently accelerate infrastructure investment with public-private partnerships in transport, water, which is a huge new crisis facing the country, and logistics. But we can't just talk about these things. We must put the reforms on the table, we must get out there and do them, and we must hold ourselves accountable to specific timelines in order to achieve those. We also need to reimagine economic empowerment in our country. As a starting point, the ANC should reevaluate its approach towards redressing the historical injustices of the past. Sadly, the current approach, no matter how well-intentioned, has favored the political elite at the expense of the vast majority of South Africans who remain languishing in poverty, in unemployment, and in hunger. This requires an alternative mode of redress, which moves away from direct ownership solely and allows businesses to invest in the communities they operate in, and thereby opening up opportunities for smaller businesses to plug into those value chains. The reality is that unemployment is our number one biggest challenge facing South Africa. We have far too many people who don't have access to work, and we've got far too many young people, although willing to get out there and contribute to the economy, cannot find the work opportunities that will enable them to do so, and at the same time live a life of dignity and opportunity. We need to reform our labor laws to ensure that it is far easier to hire unskilled and semi-skilled workers. One way to achieve this is by reducing the power of bargaining councils to extend wage agreements to small businesses who are already struggling in a struggling economy, and they're not even in the room when the decisions that affect their bottom line are made. Small business, as many other countries that are currently pulling themselves out of an economic crisis, present us with an excellent opportunity to create labor-absorptive economic growth. And we need to do everything in our power to remember that it is the private sector that creates jobs, and that our job as government is to power them up and enable them to do so. If we're serious about addressing the job crisis in South Africa, then we need to get more South Africans into jobs and get more of them out of the unemployment queues. In addition to the successes that we've had in our own portfolios, we've also strongly argued against the NHI in its current form. And we have consistently provided, during the course of the medium-term development plan and its processing, a number of constructive alternatives which we believe that can massively improve universal access to basic health care for every South African, regardless of their income status or geography. And I'm pleased to see that we've received an undertaking now that the provisions which would have caused the termination of the private medical aids have now been taken out of the medium-term development plan. I want to be clear. We are insisting that private medical schemes and aids must remain as they are, separate from the government scheme. And we look forward to a near era of working with the President and the Ministerial Advisory Committee that we put in place to place alternatives to the NHI in its current form that will provide South Africans with genuine access to quality health care, regardless of their socio-economic background. Finally, I'd like to use this opportunity to clarify some misconceptions on the DA's position on the Expropriation Act. Let me be very clear. The protection of private property rights is the cornerstone of any economy. The DA has always championed and supported this. And that's why we fought so hard, invested so much, and expended so much energy defeating the amendment to Section 25 of the Constitution. The DA is strongly of the opinion that the Expropriation Act is unconstitutional, as was pointed out by Minister Macpherson to the President, and as I've said consistently in press conferences since, and our view has not changed. We will continue to use the GNU structures to mount our opposition to the law from within government, as was announced at the press conference on the 25th of January. As I said at that time, and in the immediate aftermath of the signing of the bill, we will approach the courts, arguing that this act is indeed procedurally and substantively unconstitutional. And that position has not changed. As long as Dean Macpherson or any other DA public representative is Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, we will be able to mount protection from arbitrary action through the minister responsible for the Act's implementation. However, the reality is that situation cannot be guaranteed forever. It provides some short-term relief, but broader solutions are needed. Let me again be clear. Property rights are the bedrock of our economy and a fundamental right of every South African. Where there is doubt about property rights, it works against the jobs and growth agenda. The uncertainty over the many years of the debate on expropriation without compensation through the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution, which was defeated in Parliament, thanks to largely the efforts of the DA, made it very, very clear that the uncertainty causes huge problems to attract growth and jobs and to attract investment into the country. What we don't need is another period of uncertainty and insecurity. And that's why we believe the bill, as we said at the beginning, should have gone back to Parliament so we could have fixed these problems and ensured we had a bill that was compliant with Section 25 and which ensured that we have proper redress of land ownership in South Africa through the variety of other acts that are there, but at the same time had an Expropriation Act that was compliant with both Section 25 as well as the Constitution and the Bill of Rights contained within it. I don't, however, think that it is helpful for our country when misinformation is spread. And we must guard against it, because there are very real-world consequences for that. If that misinformation becomes fact, it has real-world consequences. And if it leads to the cancellation of aid, if it leads to the cancellation of preferential access to certain markets, it will have an effect on all South Africans. But mostly, it will have an effect on those who are currently taking advantage of these systems. And as the Minister of Agriculture, it concerns me that some of this misinformation may well lead to real-world consequences, that could see us losing preferential access for agricultural goods in other markets, and excessive tariffs being put on South African goods and services, and the impact that that will have for agricultural jobs through the entire value chain simply cannot be overestimated. And so when we deal with situations, we must deal with the facts, and we must deal with the real problems, and then we must set out determinedly to resolve those problems. That is why the DA is going to court, as we've said from the beginning, to challenge the Act on the basis I've outlined, and while we will do whatever we can to ensure that we have an expropriation bill that is in line with our Constitution and which safeguards the rights of every South African contained in Section 25 of the Constitution, which remains unamended. Now, there's been a lot of talk and commentary in recent weeks about the DA's approach to the future of the Government of National Unity. And I want to take some time to address that now. Around 8 months ago, we entered the Government of National Unity for two key reasons. Firstly, to block the radicals in the EFF and MK from getting their hands on the levers of power, knowing the destruction that would be wrought if they were given these levers of power. And secondly, to use the opportunity to turn South Africa's economy around, to entrench and foster the growth agenda, and to create jobs for the millions of South Africans who do not have the dignity of work. And I believe fundamentally that no matter how difficult the going has been, and no matter how tough the analysis that has been shared has been, it is undeniable that South Africa is immeasurably better off now for having the DA in government. And so we will continue to fight inside this government for more growth, for more jobs, and to block dangerous things and to block the ANC when it seeks to cause the country serious, lasting damage. Now, let me be clear. We did not receive 51% in the election. Goodness me, I wish it had been the case. Life would have been a lot easier today. So we must understand that we will not always get our way on policy issues that South Africa desperately needs to get our country moving. However, you can be assured that the DA continues to fight every single day within Cabinet, within the Cabinet committees, and within the corridors of power to fight for the reform agenda, to generate economic growth and create jobs. All that we ask South Africans is that you strengthen our hand by giving us a bigger say in government by voting DA. And nobody must be under any illusion that the breakers are not sitting in the wings, salivating at the prospect of the fall of this government, so that the very looters and breakers who have brought our economy to its knees, pushed our people into the unemployment queues, and robbed the opportunity from our children can get their seats back at the cabinet table. Not in the interest of great public good or delivery, but to once again open the taps of patronage, corruption, maladministration, grand theft, and its quagmire of terrible service delivery. They will take South Africa backwards, as sure as night follows day. And every country that has seen a reversion to the policies expounded by the EFF and MK have seen what happens. Greater unemployment, widening inequality, deeper poverty, more grinding hunger. And the Democratic Alliance stands firmly as the stable anchor within this government of national unity. Because South Africa needs more than anything the stable, steady hand of the Democratic Alliance. They need our experience of running the most successful province in this country. They need our experience of running the most successful metropolitan governments in this country, and they need our support and intentions, and they need our expertise now as we turn ministries around at a national level. The Democratic Alliance is firmly committed to keeping the country moving in the direction of travel it needs to go if we're going to unlock the real potential that our country has. If we're finally going to liberate our people in South Africa from the grinding poverty, from the unemployment, and from the terrible situation they have been plunged into, precisely because the wrong policies were pursued for far too long in South Africa. Now, as I've said, we may not get our way all the time. But I want to promise this to every single DA voter and every single prospective DA voter, that we will fight tirelessly every single day for the reform agenda in South Africa. We will fight to the bare bones to ensure that the tough decisions are made that will turn our country around and finally start to write a new chapter. And we will never tire of doing so. South Africa is a wonderful country, and she is surely worth the rescuing. Thank you.